Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. The International Poultry Welfare Alliance, IPWA, and the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs, US-RSPE, are actively working in the areas of sustainability and bird welfare. US-RSPE has created a sustainability framework. It's the first ever multi-stakeholder sustainability reporting framework for the entire U.S. supply chain for turkeys, chickens, and eggs. And it's a framework that extends from producer to final customer. IPWA recently published key welfare indicator guides for poultry, layers, and turkeys. And these guides are providing a practical framework for assessing and improving the welfare of poultry. Ryan Bennett, Executive Director of the combined organizations, joins us today with an update. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Before we get started, I would like to remind those of you that are joining us online to post your questions in the chat window to the right of your viewing window. And if you're joining us through any of our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, feel free to post your questions directly in those feeds, and we will get to those. So, Ryan, let's start with the fact that US-RSPE recently grew and formed an interesting approach to sustainability when it produced its first ever multi-stakeholder sustainability reporting framework for the entire U.S. supply chain. Give us an update on what's happened since that framework launched in 2022. Where's the industry at in its terms of its sustainability journey?
Yeah, so we spent about 2 years building that sustainability framework with people from across the poultry and eggs supply chain working on that, along with academics, environmental NGOs. And what we came up with was a really holistic way of measuring, communicating, and ultimately giving us the tools that we need to be able to figure out where we need to advance poultry sustainability, poultry and egg sustainability. So after 8 full supply chain pilots and public comment period and member comment periods and about 50 people in committee and the board of directors and everybody coming together to get feedback from all sorts of people, we launched that framework and built a sustainability reporting tool. And what that means is that tool allows our members to report their information into the system. And that information then allows them to see where they're at compared to their peers, in terms of sustainability. And it allows us as an organization to see where we're advancing, where we're making strides, where we're doing really well, and then maybe where we'd like to do better. We can narrow down the number of issues that we're working on. And so people have been reporting into that system. We actually just finished our first reporting cycle and are already started. We're already seeing data come in for our next reporting cycle. And later this year, we'll take that aggregated data from that sustainability framework and release it to the public and try and provide a picture of what that means in the context of, like I mentioned, where we're doing well and where we'd like to do better over time.
This framework really seems to be a highly collaborative process. Is there a plan in place that will kind of keep it updated with the latest information, the latest science?
Yeah, so we're learning things as we put it into play. As I mentioned, we had 8 full supply chain pilots, comment periods, a lot of people in production and all over the supply chain working on this. But until you put it in practice, you don't really know exactly how it's going to work. And so we're already learning things where we'd like to improve. We also know that there's areas where we feel very strongly that everybody's doing well in, but there's actually no established data that proves that point, that the poultry supply chain is actually achieving very highly in some of these areas, but there's no data to support that evidence. So once we kind of have that, and it's not something that we necessarily need to improve in, but we can show that we collected the data and that we're doing really well in those areas, those things might come out of the actual questionnaire portion and go into an introductory section. And we actually built this in a way that it's tiered. So things kind of level up over time. And tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 are the tiers that we have. Tier 1 kind of being the entry ramp onto the highway, Tier 2 being the middle lane, Tier 3 being the fast lane. And we think that some of the Tier 1s will eventually come out. Some of the Tier 2s will go into Tier 1, and we'll add some more into Tier 3. And so we're learning more and more over time, and plus issues change. It's a really holistic framework. It's not just environmental. Sustainability does not just mean environment. It's broken out into people, planet, and poultry. And so there's things in the framework that we probably wouldn't have had in the framework 5 to 10 years ago that are, even leading things that are of interest to our members now. And so things might change over time, and how we measure things and what we're measuring may change. But I still think that core of people, planet, poultry will always remain the same.
So what's the future of the framework look like for, say, someone or some organization that wants to use it?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is, it's a measurement tool. So it tells you, we can tell you how you stack up against an industry average. We're not going to share people's data, individual data. That's between them and their business and their customers. But what we can do is share industry averages. But then if you need to get better in a certain area, that's where the continuous improvement piece comes in. And that's really where I think we have some work to do as an organization, and where we can provide a lot of value to our members. So if you have an area that you want to get better in, what are some tools or some science-backed tools that maybe bring in science, economics, et cetera, that give you a suite of options of how you might be able to tackle an issue and make your outcomes that you're reporting into the framework better. So I think that's really a big next step for us, is building out that continuous improvement portion of the framework. We're also doing a lot of work. We've got a lot of retail and food service companies at the table, but there's customers that we need to be in front of all the time and make sure that they understand that they have a full questionnaire developed, for their suppliers. So one of the things that we hear from our members a lot is that they're getting questionnaires from all of their different customers, and they're all different with different methodologies, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the beauties of the multi-stakeholder alliance is that we have everybody at the table. So actually throughout this process, we would do metrics where we would rank things and show how retail and food service might care very highly about this area, and maybe the production end of the chain maybe cares a little lower about it, and vice versa. And then we had a conversation about why is that? Why do you care more about this and less about this, and vice versa? And so I think that is a continual process, is that retail and food service companies don't have to go out and hire a consultant. They don't have to go their own way to try and figure out the poultry and egg supply chain. We've got everybody at the table. We've got the science, the academics, we've got the NGOs, the farmers, the integrators and processors. So we've really got everybody at the table that needed to have input into a sustainability questionnaire or framework. And now it's just a matter of making sure that people are aware of it and utilizing that within their company, retail service. So that would be the two things: continuous improvement and folks are
Really,
a big focus of ours.
Really about bringing everybody together for that unification of the topic. It sounds like it's just providing that guidance that has been lacking.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of instances where the industry has gone out and maybe done things that they, from their perspective, and vice versa. There's a lot of retailer perspectives that are out there, and they don't necessarily fit together. And so we've tried to bridge that gap. And I think through that process, we build understanding with one another as well. That I think is vital going forward, as we're producers of animal protein.
So talk to us a little bit about, you're executive director of US-RSPE as well as IPWA. So give us a little bit of background on how these organizations work together on some of these issues.
Yeah. So both of these groups were looking at starting and launching at the same time. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of overlap in terms of membership. If you ranked our sustainability indicators over on the US Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs side of things, animal welfare actually comes at the top of the list. If you just polled our members, just a flat raw data poll, animal welfare would come at the top of the list. And then, you had a group of people in the US getting all of these questionnaires, looking for more industry information to be able to promote poultry and eggs, looking for more information to be able to share and provide more transparency with their customers over on the US-RSPE side. Then over on the IPWA side, you kind of have, a similar thing where you've got this kind of nebulous term of what does animal welfare mean to different people, and it's very different. Just like sustainability is very different, and so there's a lot of education and understanding that needs to go on, and so people involved with a lot of the same companies and organizations were looking to develop both of these groups around the same time. Luckily found each other, decided to share membership dues, to share staff, and that's how we launched. And since then, it's been a really good relationship because obviously sustainability is a factor when you're making welfare decisions. And, welfare is a factor when you're making sustainability decisions. In fact, our IPWA folks really did a good job at providing insights into the animal welfare indicator in terms of the metrics that we use for animal welfare at the US-RSPE framework. So they've worked together very well thus far. And actually, we're looking forward to strengthening that over the next couple of years.
So now IPWA released its key welfare guides just recently. What do you think is the most key part of creating the guides that really set it apart from other resources that might be out there in this area?
Yeah, we were kind of confronted, like I mentioned, with kind of a confusing space with welfare, and the way that we looked at in terms of what was needed and what we needed, especially to build trust around welfare, was science-based, outcomes-based key welfare indicators. So getting back to the bird, looking at the actual animal welfare outcome, not looking at a practice that we hope will deliver a good outcome, because one size fits all doesn't work in a global audience, and it doesn't work even in a domestic audience. And so we've got people raising birds in different climates and different barns and housing systems, selling in all sorts of different markets, fulfilling different types of commitments and protocols and standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we still didn't feel like we had the amount of trust that we needed to be able to intelligently and accurately and transparently show what we're actually doing with welfare. And so outcomes-based key welfare indicators is a way to get back to the bird, to do something that's science-based, to do something that's measurable and repeatable, and to really provide that transparency that we feel like was lacking in a discussion where you've got retail and food service companies that quite frankly are confused about what's real and what's not real about what they're hearing about how we treat our birds.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten so far on the use of the guides?
Yeah, so that's another one. I think, some people have already measured, several of these key welfare indicators for years. And, sometimes in different ways. There's some different, methodologies in how they're doing that, but they've still gotten to that key welfare indicator at the end of the day. Then some things are new for people. And so what we're finding and hearing is trying to make more materials available, once again, for that continuous improvement and that education and training around being able to actually measure those and implement those. So actually, one of our big pillars going forward is education and training for IPWA. And I think that goes for not only the measurement of the KWIs, but once you're able to actually build a baseline and figure out where you're at and want to get better, once again, trying to figure out what are the tools or suite of things available for you to improve those outcomes for those birds. So that's probably the biggest thing for us going forward, is making things easier, making things clearer, and providing resources for people to actually use that data that's coming in, so it doesn't just sit on a shelf.
So my understanding is that IPWA and US-RSPE are close to announcing some new strategic plans. Can you talk to us about those new projects?
Yeah, the first strategic plans we really followed to a T, and it really helps me as an executive director to have my board, align around something and follow that plan. Obviously, things can factor in and change over time, but we really delivered what we promised our members that we were going to do in those first 3-year strategic plans. But it was a lot around, both of these groups started at the beginning of 2019. So it was a lot around standing the organizations up, getting, a cadence on communications, getting a membership process built out. And then in terms of our cornerstones, both groups started with measurement. And so, and we will always, continually revise and own that key welfare indicators if we're the International Poultry Welfare Alliance, or the framework if we're the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs. But that was we never came here just to measure something, right? Measurement and communication is a big part of what we need to do with that information coming in. But now we're moving into a phase where we're actually figuring out what we're going to do with that data, helping our members kind of help themselves, not telling or dictating what they should do, but providing them the options and information that they need to advance sustainability and welfare. So we're kind of moving into, this implementation from a building phase to an implementing measurement to continuous improvement phase over the course of the next 3 years. And I think you see that kind of reflected in the strategic plan, along with a couple of neat other things that I think we've identified that we're also going to work on to drive adoption. So.
And you have some new board members who've recently just been elected here. Has the board evolved since both of the organizations started? What's taken place there?
Yeah, I think both boards started out very strong. I think one of the things that people are most surprised about is how much my members put into this in terms of their own time, and they don't always have that time. They work their day jobs. Of course, their organizations are invested in what we're doing. But they've really put a lot into making this group work. We don't have a ton of staff, and they've always been super engaged. So we've always started out with a great board. But I think in terms of, you're starting to see kind of that next generation of leaders start to pop up and evolve. And from an IPWA perspective, we've always had an international focus. We've always had international members. But we did start in North America, and, we were probably a little North American heavy when we started. Not anymore. We have members from around the globe, Asia, Australia, plenty, quite a few have come through and remain from Europe, Canada, North America, South America. We've really grown that, global focus on welfare, and we see a lot more of excitement and understanding in terms of what we're trying to do there. So that's been fun to bring that global focus into the board and into our leadership. And I think it's really helped us kind of step back and figure out where we need to go, because obviously we do things very, very well in North America, but there's a lot of unique and interesting challenges around the world that ultimately, if you look in the press in Australia or Europe or North America, the way that people view how we're treating animals is not that different. So really, there's a space, I think, for us to be working together on these issues and building that trust that we need over time.
Poultry industry is definitely a global industry. So I want to remind anybody who's joining us, if you have any questions, post those over in the comments or in your social media feed. We have posted some resources as well if you'd like to reference those that have come out of Ryan's groups here. So Ryan, what would you think is what are the biggest challenges that are facing IPWA and US-RSPE? What are you working with to support your membership on when it comes to these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of challenges, our members are very strong and unified, and have clearly demonstrated that over time. Our retention rate is incredible. Like I mentioned, the amount of activity that I get from my members is incredible. I think one of the things that I always challenge people, and I don't think that this is the case, but I challenge us to remember is just because we're really good at doing something doesn't mean that everybody knows how well that we're doing it. So don't forget about what we're already doing well. And also, just because we got here doesn't mean that we can't get better. And I don't see any signs of that. The poultry industry is an innovation story, and will continue to be so. We're not the same, group that we were in the 80s. And I don't expect us to rest on our laurels anytime soon. So I keep just pushing for us to go further, obviously maintaining, our principles, being science-based, of, economically viable, socially responsible. Those are three things in our mission statements that we can never stray from. But at the same time, we should remain on the front foot, because there's other proteins and industries that probably 10 years ago didn't think that they would be in the trouble that they're in now. And had they maybe been a little bit more on the front foot, I think they could have positioned themselves a little better for the future. So I think just always keeping, that innovative spirit alive within this group and others is important, but also, being proud of our past and history and the foundation and building blocks that got us there, and taking credit for those things, because there's a lot of really good stuff there that we're already doing.
You're on mute. It sounds like if you're in the poultry industry and you're not involved in groups, including your groups, it's something really you seriously need to give some consideration to. Where would folks go to get more information on IPWA and US-RSPE?
Yeah, so IPWA's website is poultrywelfare.org. When you join, we actually have a poultry welfare information network that it has our whole annual meeting, our webinars, scientific articles, lots of different things there. So poultrywelfare.org for IPWA, and then US-RSPE.org.
Oops, looks like we have lost Ryan. We'll post that. Ryan, you want to finish up those web addresses, please?
Yeah, sorry. For IPWA, it's poultrywelfare.org. And for the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs, it's us-rspe.org.
Very good. All right. We thank you, Ryan Bennett with IPWA and US-RSPE. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your updates and your insight.
Thanks for having me.
We also appreciate all of those that have joined us here today. We appreciate you tuning in. We know you're busy, and we appreciate you taking part of your day to spend with us. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 sessions are available in on-demand format at feedstuffs365.com. So feel free to share those with your peers and colleagues, or go back and rewatch them at any time. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.